how it is, and I think you're going to enjoy this session. So,
thank you.
Without further ado, I'll let you take it away.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Brian. Yeah, as Brian mentioned, I've been working with this industry for 20 years. I started off as a newspaper reporter, specifically a business reporter, and then started learning about the RV industry. I had actually grown up RVing with my parents back in the 70s, early 80s. And at my last newspaper job, I was at the Press Enterprise in Riverside, California. That's where Fleetwood is headquartered. Several other RV manufacturers are headquartered there. And so they had me cover the RV industry, and then that led to freelancing opportunities with RV Business Magazine. Then later, when the Affinity Group acquired Woodall's Campground Management, they asked me to start working with them. And that's how I started working with the campground industry specifically. So it's really been you all and your counterparts across the country who have educated me about the ins and outs of your business. And I feel really like I've learned a great deal over the years from you about all the kinds of challenges that you have. But then at the same time, since I work in a marketing capacity and a PR capacity for the industry, since I'm a former reporter, I can look at the things you have going on and then figure out, okay, what about what you're doing is going to be of interest to the news media? And we've had a lot of conversations here the last few days about the importance of these online reviews and social media and whatnot, and that is very important. But the thing that I'd like to underscore is that you shouldn't forget about your local media, meaning your newspapers, TV stations, radio. One of the things that was really interesting when I started working for RPTIA, which is the trade association that used to represent the park model industry before RVIA took over. Before they hired me, I did a media search to see what kinds of stories had been written about park models. And what I found is that 95% of the stories that had any reference to park model also had a reference to domestic violence or some other kind of criminal activity or undesirable activity taking place in an RV park. And the reason that was happening is that the industry wasn't doing anything proactive to promote the positive uses of park models. And so the reason I bring this up is that if you don't have any kind of communication plan for reaching out to your local media, if you don't do anything at all, chances are when you do end up on TV or in the local newspaper, it's going to be in a negative situation. Maybe if the police come and arrest somebody at your park, has nothing to do with your park, but you're the innocent bystander, and lo and behold, there's your park on page 1 of the newspaper because some undesirable guy got arrested there. Well, I was wondering, is Mary Garland? Yeah, Mary Garland is here, because I wanted to have her say something on this topic. If you're working proactively with your news media locally so that they know who you are, they know the positive contributions you're making to the economy, they know something about your park, then when something bad happens, they might go a little easier on you or give you the opportunity to respond in a positive way. And I'm wondering, is Michael around? Can you give Mary the microphone, because she had a situation where she was able to use her prior experience with the media to her advantage, and I wanted you to hear her story about this.
Well, this is impromptu. I didn't know this was going to happen, but anyway. I actually had the very unfortunate circumstance to have a drug dealer living in my park unbeknownst to me, and that was really not fun. So when that news story broke, it was like, oh no, I recognize that guy. So it was, and one of the other people in a ring, it was a ring, had been a customer at our park for a very long time. So of course I was contacted by the press, and they asked us to make a statement, and I could have said no, but I figured it was better for it to come from me than it was for them to make it up. So I did take the interview, but I asked them to disguise the name of the park and to not give specifics, like not to call out our name. But they could, you know, say it was at an RV park in Grand Junction. And I did have that reputation, and they did the interview, and it was a TV interview. They did the TV interview, and they did the close-up on me in front of a gray building. And so, it was just my building, and it was on my property, but they made a point of not putting in the story, Junction West RV Park, 79322 Road, Grand Junction, Colorado. They just said, this is the park owner, and this is what was going on. And I had the opportunity to frame the story in a way that said that we were aware, we had become suspicious, we had alerted authorities, so I was able to frame the story where we were positioned as having been aware, proactive, and protecting our guests rather than being the victim of this really unfortunate situation.
Excellent. I thought you should hear about that because that's an example of why you need to be developing relationships with your local reporters. Social media is very important these days. There's no question about it, but you can't ignore contacts with your other local reporters. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, because I've been paying close attention to the presentations that have been made here the past few days, we had a representative, a specialist in commercial real estate, Tao Nguyen, who taught on Sunday. And she was talking about the importance of having your financial house in order, having all the material going back 3 or 4 years to show your profit and loss and everything that a potential investor needs to know about your park. And she really emphasized the need to show rising value in your park. Well, if you have a story that comes out in the local press or in the trade media talking about growing numbers of campers coming to your park, that's third-party validation of your park as a viable business. And I have heard from people across the country in the campground industry that when they have articles that have come out about them in their local newspaper and they go to their banker to get a loan, that adds credibility to their application. That's the kind of thing that a potential buyer of your park wants to see. But social media isn't going to give you that, because even though social media is rising in importance, and newspapers are smaller than they used to be, TV stations have less reach than they used to. They're still very powerful. If something happens here at this park and it's on TV, it could be in San Antonio, in Houston, in Dallas, in minutes, depending on what it is. And so you have to have a good relationship with your reporters to make sure that that report is as positive as can be. The other thing is, we were hearing just a few minutes ago about reputation management. And there are companies out there that will monitor these websites, these review websites, and let you know if anything is happening that you need to be responding to. But I can tell you, and I was just at a conference like this a few days ago in California, and I spoke to probably 60 or 70 park operators. Nobody had a communications plan. Zero. Nadie. I mean, how do you explain that? Well, it's that you're busy. That's how you explain it. I've been working with you all for 20 years, and I know that you've got a lot of irons in the fire. It's hard. That's why this stuff isn't done. It's not that you don't want to do it, it's that you're exhausted. You don't have time. All your people are packed. But this has to be something on someone's radar at your park, and you have to have a written plan to get this done. If you only do one press release this year, it should be something that positions your park in a positive way, that talks about either improvements that you're making at the park, the growth in business, the positive opportunity that you have to help the local tourism economy. You've got opportunities unfolding right now. There was a presentation that Larry from KOA made yesterday about how right now the projections for RV sales are the highest they've been, I think, since 2005, something like that. You can localize that story yourselves, because you can go online, get the statistics from RVIA, they post them on their website, or go on woodallscm.com for woodallscampgroundmanagement.com or rvbusiness.com. You can find the latest RV shipment reports. Just run it in the search box and you'll find these reports right away. You'll see the statistics. You call your local business reporter at the local paper, call the TV station, ask for the assignment manager, and you say, you know what? This year, 2016, is projected to be the best year for the RV industry since 2005. And you know what? I'm seeing a 20% increase in campers at my park. That's a great business story for local media to do in your area. And then if they do that story, then you can save that story, put it on your website, share it on Facebook. If it comes out in the newspaper, save it, give it to a prospective buyer of your park, show it to your lenders, keep a file of these stories, but start building that portfolio. This is kind of like low-hanging fruit. And that's the way I look at your local media, and that's the way I also look at the trade media, the Woodalls, campground managements of the world, the RV businesses of the world. Those are the media outlets that will be friendliest to you and easiest to work with. The regional media is a little harder. The bigger the outlet, the harder it is to get stories with them. Doesn't mean it's impossible, it's just harder. But you need to go for the low-hanging fruit and start building a file on yourself. Build your reputation. There's going to be another report that Larry told us about yesterday that RVIA is going to issue. It'll probably come out in a few weeks. They did a national survey of the campground industry in terms of their economic impact by state. And they actually came up with figures where they calculated how many people work in the industry and how much money they contribute to the economy. And when those statistics come out, that's something else you can get for free off of Woodall's Campground Management or rvbusiness.com. Share that information with your local media. Position yourselves as experts. This is something else I've been sharing with people like you across the country. All of you know more than I do about the campground industry because I'm just asking you bits and pieces about your business and then I write about that. But all of you are experts because this is the work that you do. And the other thing that's really neat to do, if you start this process, if you simply go to the websites of your local media, find out who you should be in touch with, probably be a business reporter, or ask for a business editor and they'll let you know, but I think a business reporter. Oftentimes they'll have specific reporters who cover tourism or real estate. And start developing a relationship with them. Let them know you can be a source. All you have to do is just say, you know what, I've got this idea, you might want to consider it sometime, I can be a source for you. And if you get that story done the first time, this is the other thing that happens. If you get a story about yourself once, it's much easier to get a follow-up story again and again because the reporter will likely call you back down the road and want to do something else. When the weather gets super hot, a lot of times TV stations like to go and get pictures of kids jumping and doing cannonballs in swimming pools and things like that. They like to do fun stories. Well, you've got fun things happening in parks. This park's converting to a Jellystone park, so they're going to have activities with kids very soon. That's the kind of thing that's fun to show on TV. Yes?
That what you're saying has been true for us, that once we had one story done, lots of other story opportunities have come up. They
wanted to do a TV show, a TV news story about fire safety when there was drought and there was a lot of forest fires happening. And they said, could you build a campfire for us and let our TV reporter come out and stand in front of your campfire for the news story? And then there was an incident where there was a propane death in the general vicinity, and they said, can you let us come out and take pictures inside an RV and take pictures of propane and talk about the safety and how to be safe with propane. And so we did that for them. And so repeatedly, stories will come up. When the propane prices got really high, they came and asked how that was impacting our business, and we were able to provide information. So these stories come up, and because we're a known quantity now, we frequently, they'll call and say, can we do this aspect of a story? And we can always refuse if it's not going to put us in a positive light. But on that propane one, we were able to say, here's how you use propane devices safely, and here's different kinds of things you can do. And we came across as knowledgeable, caring, all the things that you want to come across as a campground owner.
That's really true. The other thing about all of this is, you remember hearing, I think Jane was talking about this a couple days ago, that there's information overload these days. You know, on the internet now, there's just so much information, it's just overwhelming. So how do you get in front of people? Well, through local media. You know, all of you have seen these articles that come out, best places to eat in Houston. You know, best places to camp. Well, how do you get on that list? Well, you got to reach out and talk to somebody. That's how it happens. And what I've seen happen over the years is that as a result of press releases and media outreach, is that other magazines will start picking up the recommendations that have been made elsewhere. It's like, well, they figure, well, this publication did something on it, so they must be okay. And so, you see this happen year after year. The same thing with the awards. There's going to be an awards presentation here later on. There may be some of you, and I hear this from some of the associations across the country, that they don't get that many people applying for awards. You should. Because if you get an award for best accommodations or park of the year or whatever it's going to be, that's worth a press release. That's worth some news coverage in the industry. At the very least, it'll be in the industry. Could be in your local media. Then that gets picked up. That's something else you show your banker or prospective buyer of your park. You don't want to have a situation where you're trying to sell your park and the only news coverage that's ever come out was when they arrested the drug dealer. You don't want that. Now that reminds me of another story, and I've had fun with this kind of story over the years. They're actually one of my favorites, the turnaround story. And that's something for those of you who have made improvements to your park over the years. Maybe it was a disaster when you bought it. Mary Arlington's not here. I think she got caught in a snowstorm or something. She was supposed to be here. There was a story that I wanted to do. I did part of it for her in Kansas, but she had somebody there named Cocaine Wayne at the park that she took over. And I begged her, please let me use Cocaine Wayne in the story, because that'll just catch on like wildfire. But she was worried about Cocaine Wayne, so still, she'd gotten rid of him, but was worried he'd come back if he got in the story. But anyway, she got rid of Cocaine Wayne and other lowlifes, turned her park around. And now, just like we've been hearing, you want to get rid of the riffraff at your park, get a better clientele. That's a great story to tell. That's the other thing. If you have a park that has a bad reputation or once had a bad reputation, how are people going to know that lowlifes are no longer there? You got to tell them. There's lots of parks that I've written about across the country where they attract a rough crowd. And so they become a Jellystone park, or they raise the rates and get rid of all the people who just want to go there and get drunk. We heard from Larry yesterday in his presentation, and I was really surprised about this myself. He showed a report that KOA had done. It was a continuation of the outdoor, or the camper survey that they had done in cooperation with some other industry partners. And they found that something like 54% of people camp in a tent. 54% of the people who camp in a tent. And then the rest of them were split evenly between cabin campers and RVers. I thought that was surprising, because most of the time when I call campgrounds across the country, they tell me they're trying to get rid of their tenters. Larry said, well, that's because a lot of tenters are, they like to drink and they don't want to spend a lot of money. Well, you get rid of those people by raising your rates, and then you attract the kinds of campers, tent campers that are good people. Well, I'm thinking if among you who are here, if you have a good tent camping story, this is another situation where you can grab this report, you can find it on woodallscampermanagement.com or RV Business, hand that report to your local reporter and say, you know what, we're seeing really strong interest among tent campers, and we expect this trend to continue. That's another good business story. And then when they do that story, then they talk to your tent campers, and then they say why they like camping at your park. And so it's worthwhile to do that. And this is something else, that I've obviously, been biased, admittedly biased about all of the changes that have taken place in the media over the years, because I started off as a newspaper reporter. I worked as a newspaper reporter for almost 12 years. And then, so I've continued to pay close attention to what's going on. I've had a lot of friends kind of evolve, with it. But one of the things that I continue to see is that traditional media, whether it's the New York Times, Washington Post, other traditional media outlets, continue to be the thought leaders. They're the ones that are actually producing stories. Facebook will share the story, but you don't go to Facebook for news. You go to Facebook to see somebody else's news. They're not producing news. And so I think it's worthwhile to reach out, make an effort to reach out to these reporters and start establishing that relationship, so that if you do have a drug dealer show up at your park or any other kind of bad situation, you're in a better position to deal with the reporters who come, because you already have a relationship with them. They're people. I worked as an investigative reporter for most of my newspaper career, and I was a real son of a bitch. I really was. Because I loved doing investigative work, and I loved exposing corruption. But I found that when people were ducking me, it was a lot easier for me to be ruthless than if they actually met with me face to face. Because if they meet with me face to face and they're polite, they're nice, I'll be polite and nice right back to them. If they're a jerk, well, I'll give them the same back. But it's amazing how much you can achieve with that face-to-face relationship. Joe Moore and I were talking a couple days ago about how much you can get done in government simply by going out and having lunch with somebody. Because we're all people, and if you can develop a face-to-face relationship with someone, you'll get a lot more done, and it'll be a lot more positive than if you're simply dealing with them over the phone or through emails and whatnot. It's really important to do this. So one thing that I really wanted to emphasize is that you take the time. This is something that needs to be fixed. You need to have a written plan. The plan is not simply to buy a directory ad and to keep the website going. You've got to have an outreach plan locally, and an outreach plan through Taco. Taco will send out queries from time to time asking, what's your business like Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July weekend? Do you have any vacancies still? Oftentimes they'll send out emails and hardly anybody responds. Those are missed opportunities. That happens in California, happens in other states. People are busy, but they need to respond to these kinds of things. This is another time when you have a media opportunity. That's going to be less than 2 months away. Memorial Day is coming. Do you have anybody coming to your park who has a really neat story? Do you have families that have been coming there for generations? Maybe you've got 3 generations of a family that have been camping at your park on Memorial Day weekend for the past 30 years. What a great story to share with the media, with TV. Let them come out and interview grandma or the great-grandparents. And the little baby that's going to be the 4th generation or the 5th generation coming to the same campground. Talk to them about the wholesomeness of camping. There's neat stories that come from all of this. The other thing is, you know, we've all heard about the challenges with Wi-Fi. Well, there's a story there too. I've interviewed park operators who are in areas where cell phones don't work. And you know, they'll tell me stories about how families will arrive and the kids freak out when they find there's no Wi-Fi code and the cell phones don't work. But then those are times when the families can interact and have a conversation uninterrupted again. There's neat feature stories that you can, you know, share on these topics as well. And that's a way to get yourself known. Make yourself visible among the thousands of parks that are out there. But you have to seize the initiative. Because if you don't do anything at all, chances are the only time the reporters are going to show up is when there's a problem. And you don't want the drug dealer story, you don't want the gas leak story, you don't want all of that. You want it, but you have to be proactively out there making things happen. Let them know that you're a positive force in the community. This is something else that a lot more could be done about. We heard on the first day here about local government being hostile toward new parks. Well, we all know that a lot of that's because they don't know what the RV industry is like nowadays. Well, they also don't know what the economic contributions of RV parks are. But when that report comes out that we heard about from RVIA in a few weeks that quantifies the dollar amounts that each state get from their RV industry, from the campground industry, that's going to be powerful ammunition to go to a city council with to share. You know, I seldom hear about parks doing PR plans when they're preparing to expand. And then they go, you know, to a planning commission or a city council, and then sometimes they run into difficulty. Well, they haven't done any preparation work from a communication standpoint. And then the story comes out and it's not as positive as it could be. But it could be positive if they did a little more work on it, got their talking points together. The other thing to highlight is new investments you're making. You know, if you're buying more park models, cabins, accommodations, that's a new trend. More and more people coming into the industry, they like to stay in cabins. Talk about it. If you're adding 2 more cabins, 3 more cabins, that's a story. You know, I mean, if a hotel, if there's a local hotel here and they're adding 10 rooms, well, the media would do a story on that, so why wouldn't they do 10 more campsites? That's the same idea. We should talk about it. Let's see here. The other thing that I think you can talk about here in Texas, and I've been hearing about this from several of the park operators, is several of you have people staying at your parks who aren't necessarily tourists, they're people who are working. They have jobs. They're working in the oil industry, refineries, they're working on construction projects, or they may be traveling doctors or nurses. Well, that's another good story to share. I like this story because I'm a former business reporter. I like the story about the fact that RV parks are providing temporary housing accommodations because the local real estate markets are too tight. That's a fantastic real estate story. And that's something that will get picked up because who's covering the slack? And you know, these are the places where people can stay, either because they're just going to be here temporarily, or maybe they're shopping for a house and they need someplace to stay temporarily. I know that La Hacienda RV Resort used to have a lot of people who would do that. They'd stay there temporarily. So that's a good way to get your park in the press and talk about it, talk about the positive benefits that it's providing to the community. And the more exposure you get in a positive way, then the more success you'll have in the future when you try to get more positive exposure that way. You know, the other thing, I've had this on my notes, I've been hearing about these people who can't wait to be winter Texans, but they're still having to work, but they cheat, and they drive down from up north, and they work down here during the winter, they just bring their laptops with them, and they continue their accounting business or whatever. But instead of working in Detroit, they're working in, you know, the valley somewhere. Those are great stories to talk about as well, because then that story gets out there, and then that plants a seed with somebody else who's freezing his butt off up north, thinking, "Oh man, another winter up here." You know, a lot of them are empty nesters. They don't necessarily have to be in Chicago. They could be here. So why pay for all that heat? They could just come down here and do their work. Most of us, you know, who aren't in the campground industry are doing your work on computers anyway. That's how I do my work. It doesn't matter where I am. I can be anywhere most of the time. That's the way a lot of people are these days. Now, some people ask me, okay, Jeff, this sounds great, but I haven't written a news release before. How am I going to do it? Go to Woodall's Campground, it's a website, woodallscm.com or rvbusiness.com, and you will see every day examples of press releases posted. And you will see examples of these kinds of stories I'm talking about. That's your template. Those are your templates for how you do this. And the other thing is that those two websites in particular are desperate for copy. They're desperate for it. I mean, it's just, so they're hungry. That's good for you, because that means they will likely take what you put together. They might change it around a little bit, but
What were the name of the two sites?
rvbusiness.com and Woodall's CM for campgroundmanagement.com. Woodall's Campground Management's website is a little bit better for campground industry because it's more specific just to campgrounds. RV Business has both RV industry and campground industry news. But they're good examples because you will be able to see what the whole industry is putting out there. There's no reason that you can't do the same kinds of press releases that KOA or Jellystone or anybody else is doing. It's not that hard. It takes time to do it, but it's not that hard. But you have to allocate some time to get it done. And think about, you know, what are the best stories that you can say about your park this year? You know, do you have a turnaround story? Are you adding something new? Do you have people staying at your park who, you know, are keeping you at 100% occupancy, and they're also helping the local economy? You know, you need to be on the radar of your reporters and be alert to what's happening, you know, in the news, because there's often opportunities for you to kind of raise your hand and get involved in news stories. And like I said earlier, if reporters get to know you, they'll call you back again and again, even when you're not expecting it, and you'll get exposure. And that, again, is something that you can share on social media channels and share it on, you know, Facebook. You know, you can take a press release that you put together and have it as a blog posting on your website. And this is something else I hear about a lot from people that, you know, they have websites but they don't have time to write blog postings. Well, we gotta make time. If you do a press release, then you can post the content of that release on the website as a blog posting, so that's 2 uses. Then share it on Facebook, that's 3. So you're getting a lot of use out of that. It's very valuable to be doing that. The other thing I should mention is that when you reach out to your local media, you're growing your business base. Because when you just deal with Facebook, you're only dealing with people who have been with your park or their friends, but you're not expanding the universe beyond those people. If you get into a magazine, a regional magazine, or a newspaper, say the Austin American Statesman, Dallas Morning News, you know, San Antonio Express News, thousands and thousands of people you would be reaching who wouldn't otherwise ever see your Facebook page, would never know who you are. And the other thing is that you're rising to the top in terms of awareness, because how many campgrounds are going to be written about in the San Antonio newspaper each year? Not very many. Why is that? Because there's only a handful that ever reach out. Most people don't take the trouble. They don't take the time. KOA gets a lot of exposure because they have a marketing department, and a lot of their parks see the value of the outreach. But that's not the only thing they do. They're very active on social media too. But that's the world we live in. We have a very fractured media market now. We've got social media channels, we've got traditional media channels. If you wanted to reach my daughter, you'd have to put something on Yahoo News or one of her funky websites that she goes to. She'd never see it if it was on TV, and she'd never see it if it was in the newspaper. If you wanted to reach my mom, you better have it on TV news, or she's never going to hear about it. You know, that's just the way it is nowadays. You can't reach everybody like you used to through just a couple of media channels. You can't even reach them all through campground guides, the printed directories, but they're still critical. They're critical, as Brian was saying earlier. That's often how people find the websites. It's not that they're looking for oleander acres if they don't know about it. But if you're in the directory, oh, there, let's stay there. Let's check them out. Then you find it. So all of these things kind of work together, and it helps raise awareness. Let's see. Oh, the other thing I need to mention. This is another big issue. And this is something that you can start working on immediately. It's probably the easiest thing to do. And I've got one of these here. I'm going to raise it up because a lot of people are forgetting about these things. Cameras. I just talked to an editor last week in connection with another client. He's a magazine editor, great Bay Area magazine. Couldn't use any of the client's photos. Why? Because they were taken with an iPhone. iPhone pictures, while they look good visually when you look at them, or look good when you post them on Facebook or whatever, the resolution is not high enough for print magazines most of the time, or newspapers. They can't use them. So you need to have somebody taking real pictures with a real camera at your park. And I will tell you also that good quality, high quality photos, that's like the Achilles heel from a marketing standpoint for the campground industry. I can't tell you how many times we as an industry have lost media opportunities because the photos suck, for lack of a better word. Or they're non-existent. You know, they're awful for the most part. Awful. Really bad. They're really, really, really bad. And you can see it on the websites. A lot of times, the photos aren't that great. Well, that may be, that's the way anybody's going to see you. And if the photos aren't great, well, you know, you got to fix that, because first impressions are powerful. You know, the park itself may be fabulous, but if the photos aren't good, people aren't going to give it much attention. Well, that same thing happens with the media, too. And I've had editors tell me, Jeff, you wrote a fantastic story, but we can't use it because you don't have any good photos to go with it. And if I write a story and I'm in California and the park I wrote about is in some other state, you know, I can't go to the other state to go take pictures for them. I have to rely on them. And this, I find, is something that too many parks are dropping the ball on. You need to have a real camera and take real pictures. And if you're not good with camera, hire somebody, you know, because good photography goes a long way and you can use those images again and again. There's been images that I've taken out here on trips. Sometimes Brian will have me visit parks before I come to these meetings. I've taken pictures at some of the parks here in Hill Country, and they've been used by magazines, national magazines. And it's not that the photos are fantastic. They're like, okay, they're decent. But it's that, you know, we have them, and there isn't anything competing with them, really. So if you have a photographic capability, you know, use it, or hire somebody to come take pictures. It's an investment that you can use again and again. You can use those pictures on your website, brochures, rack cards, Facebook, and use them with the media. Media needs JPEGs, high resolution JPEGs. They also need, if you can come up with it, video, because I can use that in pitches too. You know, when you have fun activities, crazy things that go on at your park, try to get some video of that. It's fun. That's something else that really sells with the media, is fun. And this is something, we've talked about the changes that have taken place in media over the years. The distribution channels have changed, but the stories have not. What constitutes a story is the same. And people really like to have fun. They're looking for a good time. They're looking for, ways to enjoy life. And you all provide that. So what you have to do is capture that. Capture images of people really enjoying life at your park. If you've got a great fishing lake, if you've got a place, if you have fishing derbies and kids go catch their first fish, get pictures of that. Highlight that. If you have competitions that take place or silly games, try to get video of that, and share it. That could be the video that you get of something fun going on at your park, could be a way to entice a TV station to drive an hour and a half to come to your park to get video of one of your activities. And then once you get that TV coverage, they're likely going to show up again and again in the future. I get reporters calling me in the Coachella Valley, and it's just because they know that I'm in touch with some, people who are active out there. So they'll call me on a slow day saying, Jeff, you got anything going on today? Just fishing for something. That can happen to you if you get yourself known. So, let's see. I talked a lot about the communication plan. Two other things I want to mention. I think I've got time. In the work that I do for the industry across the country on the marketing and PR front, I find that websites often are not updated. It's better than it used to be, but I still find that you go to activity calendars that have nothing on them. Or sometimes you'll see activity pages from last year and there's nothing for this year. Websites really have to be updated. The other thing is, and Michael wanted to make sure I mentioned this, make sure you have somebody working the front desk who doesn't sound like they just got out of jail. Jane was talking earlier about her dad. I can tell she's really close with her dad, but she doesn't want him anywhere near her campers or anywhere near the telephone. Keep him away from the front desk. And there's a lot of people that are like that. They're not good people. And a lot of times I call parks every week across the country. And I don't know, maybe it's a little bit better than it used to be, but I'd say half the time I call a park, I get somebody who sounds gruff, like they just got out of jail. They may not even say where I've called, or it may be unintelligible, where I have to ask them again, is this such and such campground? Because I didn't understand them. The other thing is that they don't have a happy tone in their voice. And all of these things are things I'm picking up in the first 20 seconds of a phone call. If you call Texas Advertising, they'll answer the phone saying, it's the best day ever. Well, when you hear that, you're automatically thinking, this is great, I'm not going to be arguing with this person because she's in a good mood and she's happy. It's starting off that way. That's the attitude that you have to get, because a lot of communication, don't they say something like most communication is nonverbal? People pick up on all these cues, on intonations, things like that. So you've got to have somebody working the phones who people will fall in love with, literally. You got to have your sweetest people working the phone, and they have to be knowledgeable. They have to be knowledgeable about the park. They have to know about things to see and do in the area. They also have to be empowered to know the answers to questions. I can't tell you how often I call parks and I get people who don't know anything. I'll ask them questions and they just don't know. I don't know, you'll have to talk to the manager. And so it's like, okay, so I'm thinking, great. That means I'm going to lose more time because I'm going to have to call back later and I don't even know when I'm going to reach this manager. And, you know, so I wonder how often does that happen with campers calling and they're getting somebody who can't answer the questions or they don't sound real helpful. And this is an issue because you all are spending money marketing your park. I spend my time promoting your parks and the industry in phone calls with reporters, communication all over the country. But I see it all going up in smoke when, you know, when the reporter or the customer finally gets to the front lines, the front desk, whether it's face-to-face or in person, and then it all falls apart because, you know, somebody is in that position who really shouldn't be there. So I mention this to you because it's still an issue, because I encounter it all over the country, and it needs to be dealt with, because all of, you know, a lot of everything else that we're doing can fall apart if it finally gets to the point where the camper calls and it doesn't sound like, you know, a real good place. So these are things to keep in mind. You know, I didn't really want to be repeating, you know, the same things everybody else was saying, so I've been trying to cover some different bases with this. But these are things that I think that you all can do, but a key thing is to write them down, because if there's no plan, it won't get done. But if you have a checklist, and I'm notorious for these things, I go down and oftentimes I don't, I'm very honest with my kids, I oftentimes don't get everything done that I have on my list, but at least I know what I'm supposed to do and I'll carry it over to the next day and try to get it done. I know you all are busy, extremely busy. It's hard for many of you even to be here right now because you have a lot of stuff you have to do back at your park. But this is a time when you just kind of take a breath and think, okay, what can I be doing right now to make things a little bit better? And, you know, with 20 years of working with you all, these are things that I think need attention. So pay attention, you know, put a plan together. What releases are you going to do this year? At least go for one. At least figure out who your local business reporter is. At least find that out. Start developing a relationship with him or her. Maybe invite him or her to go meet you at Starbucks or someplace local. Have a quick coffee. Don't make it sound like you're going to take a lot of their time. You know, give them a little bit of information about your park and say you'd like to be included as a source when they do stories on tourism in the area, or on real estate, or other aspects of the economy. Give them examples of the stories, the story ideas that I was sharing with you earlier. You know, when those statistical reports come out, share that with them. Hand it to them, because they're not going to have that. But if you provide that to them, and it's from a national industry association like RVIA, they'll use that information, and then you're the local face on that story. That's handed to you. And what a great way to position your park as an expert source and as a valuable contributor to the local economy. And then it builds value and visibility for your park at the same time. And that's what you need. You need visibility among the sea of parks that are out there in the internet. And you need to be able to show value. And you show value by increasing occupancy investments and people saying positive things about your park. You know, these people that fill out the survey forms, ask a couple of your favorite ones if they would ever mind talking to a reporter. If you could share their contact information with a couple of reporters. Most of them won't mind talking about you. And reporters will love having a real camper they can talk to. And those people will give the best recommendations you could possibly ask for. Now, what would be better than that, than having one of your campers talking to the San Antonio Express News or the Houston Chronicle or the local Kerrville Times, I think it's called, about your park. Have that in print. You know, that's something you can frame in the office. Have people see that when they come in, just like when you go into restaurants sometimes and they have articles framed. So you should be aiming for some of those about your park. And when you get your awards, make sure people know about that. And are there any questions? Yes?
Jeff, can you share your email address with everybody?
Yeah, my email address is campinginfo, like information, source, campinginfosource@gmail.com. And if you have any questions or whatever, feel free to email me and I'll help out as best I can. Yes?
Got to tell you a cute little incident I had back in 2002. Family Motor Coach was going to come into Kansas, which they did at the fairgrounds, and we had 4,754 coaches come in, okay? I had a fellow that's going to put in the park for 2002. He contacted me the fall before. I visited the park location in February, and he said, I'm gonna put it in. I'm gonna start out right away. When can you have it in by? He said, by July. I said, would you promise me that? He looked at me kind of funny, what do you mean promise you? I said, well, Jan and I are going to go to the big event in Perry, Georgia in March. Now, before we get back from Perry, Georgia, you will have reservations for your park you haven't even turned a shovel for. Okay, and that's what happened. He had reservations before we got back from Perry, Georgia, and now I was trying to think outside the box. What can I do to really put things up for him? So I was thinking outside the box, and I said, well, this is an Amish community. You've got plenty of teams of horses and buggies here. Beside these big motor homes, why don't you have a horse and buggy come pull right beside a big, expensive motor home right in the park? I thought that'd be a cute story. I contacted the Hutchinson and Wichita newspapers. They said, we don't get it. We don't get it. I said, for you to put a picture of a horse and buggy camping in a park next to a big, expensive $1 million motorhome, you don't get it? I said, go back to school.
You know, that's something else, you know, what he's mentioning there, that's something else that you can do that I should mention. If you have something taking place at your park that isn't necessarily worth a full story, sometimes the media will take a picture with what they call a fat caption. So if you take the picture yourself and send it to them, sometimes they'll use it. I've had them use my pictures before on things where they haven't, you know, run a story, but they'll run enough of it because they'll let me write the caption that goes underneath. So that's something else you can do.
Yeah, I think a good example of that was when we pulled into this park, they were having a truck camper rally. They were expecting 75 rigs, only 58 showed up, and that's a pretty good rally. And I learned some things that I had no idea of because we had one of these rigs right next door to us. I didn't know truck campers had slides. Out the side, out the back, awnings out the back, lights off the awnings. And Deborah got in a conversation with a gal who was running the rally. These rigs cost 50 to 60 grand for a truck camper. Now, at the park here, and also it was a younger demographic, so you got all kinds of bells and whistles going off that the park here could have gotten some great PR out of just that rally, because that's what our industry is all about, is what's unique, what's different, what makes up those people. And those folks were super proud of their units, and they would have given you comments all day long, I guarantee you. Joe's had like the Sisters on the Fly. How many people have had them in their parks? They're totally unique. They're the little old rigs that they've done it themselves. They travel as ladies together. I mean, you'd be surprised what eccentric stuff there is in our industry that will get picked up and excite the masses and work, right? Yes. You want to tell them the butterfly story on Oleander Acres real quick?
Well, sure. Oleander Acres actually has started a butterfly garden. They put in about 200 plants that attract more than 100 different species of butterflies. And they contacted me about that. And they had put together a nice little video about it. So I put together a press release and sent that out. And lo and behold, it ended up on the front page of the local newspaper in, where was that exactly? Mission, I guess. In Mission, Texas, on the front page, the Progress Times. And then Texas Gardener magazine is also going to do a story on that. And I see a lot of potential with this. And they're also planning on putting in things that will attract more birds in the future. And you might wonder, okay, well, why does it make sense to put in a butterfly garden, and why does it make sense to talk about it? Well, a lot of people like going into the Rio Grande Valley to see the butterflies and to see the different species of birds that go through there. There's even a butterfly festival there in November, I think. And so there's a lot of nature-loving people who like to go there for that. Well, they've had a lot of development take place in that area as well, and as development has progressed, it has taken away the habitat for the butterflies and the birds. Well, so by restoring habitat there, that's not only great for wildlife, but it's great for the wildlife enthusiasts who come to that area. So they're actually not only helping wildlife, but they're helping their park and the local economy. Well, then as word spreads about what they're doing, that's kind of like the benefit that you hear from parks that put in solar energy and windmills and things like that. You attract a certain demographic there, and so they attract and will continue to attract more and more people who like wildlife going there. Well, those are going to be great people coming to their park. And a lot of people who like birds, who are into birds, they travel all over the world. So these are going to be people who have the economic means to stay there for the whole winter and travel. They're going to talk to their friends, and and then they're getting pictures of some of these exotic butterflies, for example, that come into the area. As they get pictures of birds and whatnot, there are people who will travel all over the world just to see a particular type of bird or butterfly. And this is a great way to position that park in a very positive light. So it's very valuable to do that, and they'll continue to get exposure from that. I've been sending that out to several different media outlets because I see a lot of potential media interest in that.
And so I'll make one other comment. How many of you have ever seen your favorite actor or actress in a movie or television, and you just loved them to death, and then you saw them on late night TV, and it was like, wow, what an idiot. They don't even know how to speak. They can't carry on a conversation. There's a reason for that. They're given a script and a director who says lights, camera, action. The next thing you know, they're off and running, and you loved them to death. But in real life, they're pretty boring. Well, the same thing's true with your front office personnel. In real life, they might be a little bit boring. But if you give them a script and you train them and you go, look, when the phone rings, that's your lights, camera, action. You light up like a friggin' Christmas tree, and when the phone goes down, you can be boring again. Don't worry about it. Nobody cares. All right. Anything else for Jeff? All right, Jeff, we want you to have lunch on us.
Thank you.
We're going to get a picture.